Welcome, everybody. Thanks for coming out to the NCA annual meeting. As I do every time I stand up here, I am going to try and take a picture for the new incoming Director of Communications that I will talk about here shortly, but this will be going up on our website tomorrow. Smile. It's always nice to have something up on our events page. Thank you. All right. I'm David Limbach. I'm the president of the NCA. Why don't you go to the next slide? I'm going to go through a quick rundown of NCA information. It'll take about 15 minutes. And then I'm going to turn it over to these fine gentlemen over here who are going to give us lead a discussion or lead a presentation on what the Marshall Fire was and how it changed life as we know it today. So go to the next slide. The election ends at midnight tonight. So if you haven't voted, there's voting forms over there on the table. And those of you online can vote online. The election ends, like I said, at midnight tonight. So the unofficial results, unless something extremely drastic happens in the next 6 hours, is that I will be reelected president. It was touch and go there for a while. And Leonard will stay on as secretary. My wife, Emily, will become the director of communications. And Kim will stay on as director of events. Liz will stay in division of roads. And then Mark and Derek will stay as their area representatives. Half of our board is elected in even years, and half of our, board is elected in odd years. So this is the rest of our board that is staying in their positions, and all of these people are great to work with. They really do well despite the low salary and no benefits, no dental plan or anything like that. Yeah, there is a salary, and we double it every year, and it remains the same. Great people to work with. They do a lot for the community behind the scenes, whether that's parades or events or meetings or whatever. It's just a great bunch of people of the many different alphabet soup organizations of Niwot that do so many things for our town, our community, not a town. Next slide, please. So quickly reviewing what happened in 2021, of course, COVID was still a thing. And we had to adapt to that. So for example, instead of having a 4th of July parade, we had a 4th of July motorcade. And it actually worked out pretty well. You were in the lead car, as I recall.
I was.
Yes.
It was great.
It was fun. And then cleanup day was moved from May until September while we figured out how we were going to deal with the mask mandates and all that other fun stuff. But other things stayed the same. National Night Out and the Veterans Banner Parade remained the same. So for those of you that were NCA members back in 2020, you may recall that since we weren't able to deliver on hardly anything in that year, we gave everybody a whole nother year of membership. And so everybody that was a member in 2020 automatically was renewed for 2021. And then kind of make it fair for people that still wanted to join, new memberships were half price. And so as a result, we had our highest ever membership of 430 households. So a high watermark for us that we hope to get back to someday. For this year, we're going to be back on track. We're going to try and do all the things that we do every year. Unfortunately, this year started out on a sour note, and we started off with a Marshall Fire campaign. The NCA kicked in $500, and then we collected a bunch of money from other generous citizens. And as I understand it, I'm no expert at this, but when it comes to disaster relief, there's the first phase where people need toothpaste, clothes, food. The second phase where they need a place to stay, and that's what people are in right now. And then the third phase is, rebuilding. And so we were able to help out with this first phase by taking our donated money and buying gift cards and distributing them to the people that were staying here in the Niwot area to get them like Subway sandwiches, a Niwot market, tavern, et cetera, et cetera.
Dave, do you know how many there were?
I think there was 9 or 10 families that we sponsored.
It came in and out, something like that.
Yeah. Each family got about $300 to $500-ish, give or take. Our membership drive is over, although we'll probably get another kick of membership when it comes time for cleanup day. Annual meeting, you're here. That's where we're at right now. Cleanup day, mark your calendar, is May 21st. And then a new event this year is the tractor event at the Schleppeke's house. It's still kind of under design. It's gonna be an inaugural event. I'm not gonna get into details here, but look for information coming to you via email and our website. Then our usual 4th of July celebration, National Night Out in August, and then the Veterans Banner program in the fall. Next slide. We're gonna be doing the usual things we do behind the scenes, like gathering information from our immediate level of government, which is Boulder County, and distributing it back to you, and then taking feedback from you and just getting it back to them. Open space projects. The mural underneath Niwot Road is in a bad state, and we'll be doing a refreshing project probably in July. Road crew supports all the different events from Niwot High School homecoming to the Honeybee Festival to everything. It's a group of, a band of brothers, if you will, that makes everything go in a safe and orderly fashion. Grants, we've supported a bunch of Eagle Scout projects and other things. And then as needed, public meetings, surveys, and track reports, and track and report on interesting issues that impact Niwot, which takes us right into the two most important things that people ask me about, the first of which is subdivision road paving. Not a lot to report there other than things are looking possible that we might be able to get involved, get a general transportation measure on the ballot that would include some subdivision road paving. The Public Works Department, formerly known as the Transportation Department, seems open to the idea, but until something gets down on paper, on the ballot, we won't know for sure. So what's coming up next for that is the Boulder County will be conducting a survey, and then based on the results of that survey, they will consider what, how, and what kind of language might be possible for a ballot measure in the fall. I'll go back one slide, please. There we go. The Subdivision Paving Coalition, SPC, has been the driving force, and we have been supporting them. So if you want more information, please go to their website. You don't need to write any of this stuff down because this presentation will be on our website tomorrow, so you'll be able to find all this information then. So also look for a public survey next month. Now, next slide. The other pressing issue of our times is the Boulder Public Library District. For those of you who aren't aware, the City of Boulder's public library system is looking to expand its borders to form a district so that they can have a better and more stable funding source. And the current proposal includes Niwot. And a lot of people didn't know that. So the NCA took it upon themselves, along with reporters from the Left End Valley Courier and other members of alphabet soup organizations in Niwot, to get the word out, because a lot of people didn't know this was happening. And the first they might have heard of it was in the fall election, which would be too late because the voting districts in Niwot are so small that whatever Boulder City wants, Boulder City is going to get. So if we want to have our say, we have to get it done before the ballot language is formed. So where it stands now is that the Boulder City Council adopted the resolution pretty much as is, with Niwot in the district. The Boulder County Commissioners, however, have balked a little bit, and they've tabled the issue because they need more information. Specifically, I mean, during their meeting, they talked about Niwot for about 45 minutes of their hour and a half. And so they need more information to say, you know, if Longmont's going to form a district, would they want to have Niwot, et cetera, et cetera. And so some very important information that we gave them was from a survey that hopefully you all participated in. Next slide. It was a 7-question survey, very basic, and I'm going to skip the demographic questions and just go to the core of the matter. Under the context of a $26 annual increase per $100,000 of value of your house, would you support this tax measure? Resoundingly, people who took our survey said no. Next slide. The other question was, do you want to be part of a library district at all? And this kind of drives to people who have a library card and feel like, you know, if you have a Longmont library card right now or a Boulder library card, you're pretty much freeloading, right? Because you're not paying into the system except for the sales tax you pay when you go out to dinner or buy anything in the city of Boulder. So you're not totally freeloading. But would you be interested in being in a library district at all? And 2/3 pretty much said no, but about 1/3 or 40% actually said yes. And this is the question that got the Boulder commissioners thinking about Niwot in particular. Assuming identical proposals, would you prefer to be aligned with Longmont or would you prefer to be aligned with Boulder? And as you can see, the answer is Longmont for anybody who's answering the survey for Niwot.
How many respondents did you say you had?
We had 200 responses, but we eliminated a bunch of them because they were duplicates, and we narrowed it down to 150? Yeah, 156 that we absolutely verified for those of you who gave us your NCA ID or your NCA email so that we knew that it was one vote, no double dipping, no ballot box stuffing, and presented that to both the Boulder City Council and the Boulder County Commissioners.
That was enough for them to?
No, it wasn't. They identified that our survey was not statistically valid because to be statistically valid, you've got to represent every race, socioeconomic group, renters, owners, and we didn't match that criteria. So, but they did find the survey to be very intriguing and worthy of discussion. And so that's why they tabled their matter so that they can figure out what they're going to do next.
So as I understand it, each city gets a lot of funding from state and federal government for libraries. What is the proportion? Because we use a term that's very loaded, saying we're freeloading. It's so not true because
I probably should have spoken out of turn like that, but I don't know the answer to that question.
It would be good to know the facts before you state something like that.
They weren't reporting any funding from the feds or the state.
So not from the
So before we get too sidetracked on this issue, what we're going to do is we're going to continue to work with the Boulder County Commissioners when they resume this, and as soon as they start talking, we are going to be involved, and we will report to you as soon as possible what they come up with. I've got a letter into an email into their chief of staff, who I think is out of the office right now, and I hope to have some information for you this week.
So you mentioned the Longmont proposal, right? I think they're working on that. Do we know if Niwot is or isn't?
Okay, so there is a Longmont Public Library District in the works. It's 1 to 2 years behind this proposal. They won't say whether or not they would want to include Niwot because they're waiting to see what happens with the Boulder County Public Library District.
Because I read somewhere they were talking about submitting it in as early as May. So that's why I'm wondering if you think they'd have to be discussing it if that's true.
That's not my understanding. My understanding is that they can't possibly have anything in time for this fall's election. But we'll keep tracking it. And you can follow all the issues on our website by either looking for updates right at the top, or we have an issues tab there at the upper right that has links to all of the different issues that we track year to year. And the top of the one right now is the Boulder Library District. So we will do our best to keep you informed as soon as more information becomes available.
Did the library champions file their petition?
I don't know. The question was, did the Boulder Public Library Champions file their petition? And I said, I don't know.
Under state law, organizations can form up as not a governmental entity, it's just champions of the library. They can literally, with 100 signatures, file a petition and put it on the ballot.
Yeah, so there's 3 possible outcomes here. The first outcome is that the Boulder County Commissioners adopt the proposal with Niwot in it. The second outcome is the Boulder County Commissioners adopt the proposal with Niwot not in it, or they don't adopt the proposal at all. And if they don't adopt the proposal at all, it's quite likely that the Boulder Champions will get their 100 signatures and put it on the ballot anyway. So our opportunity to direct what's going to happen with this is with the Boulder County Commissioners before they decide what to do with the resolution. And so that's why we're in close contact with them. Yes, sir.
Two key questions that I never got an answer on was the nebulous language in terms of the tax being based on the value of your house. Initially, it was saying on the assessed value of your house, not the market value of your house. So I never got an answer to that. Then when they said expanded services would be provided, I wanted to know if there would be an actual building in Niwot if it passed.
Right. To quickly summarize what the proposal is it's $26 per year per $100,000 of assessed property value,
Okay,
3.8 mils.
so it is assessed.
The proposal includes a Niwot and Gun Barrel corner library, which is probably very small. They, under their rough estimate, and nothing's firm until the resolution gets adopted and they elect trustees and they start to form the language and the official boundaries. So all of this is still very fluid. And so we're just waiting for the Boulder County Commissioners to resume this discussion after they tabled it at their meeting 2 weeks ago.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
The estimate is that the tax would pull $400,000 a year out of Niwot.
The estimate is that it would generate $470,000 of tax, and the cost of running a corner library is about the same. I don't know if that's true or not. Anyways, before we get too bogged down on this, please go to our website and keep following this issue, and as important details come out, we are going to be shooting emails. Yes, Brad?
So is there any thoughts of redoing a survey with some of the additional data that they might need in order to accept it?
To be a statistically valid survey, we would need to hire an independent company to the tune of about $30,000. So no, that's not going to happen. But they understand that we're not going to do that, and they use the word intriguing and compelling quite often with our survey. And if there's more information that we need to gather for the commissioners, we'll gather it from you. All right, next slide. So now I'm going to turn it over. 17 minutes, that's not bad. I'm going to turn it over to our guests, Sterling and Curtis, who are going to talk about the Marshall Fire. As the symbols represent, Curtis Johnson represents the Boulder County Sheriff's Office, and Sterling is from the Mountain View Fire Rescue District. So please welcome our guest speakers.
Those before guns.
Thank you for having us speak tonight about the Marshall Fire, and then we'll really also give you some information about what you can do to be prepared if should or if this happens in this area as well. Or when. Yeah, it's one of the things. Sterling Fulton, I'm Deputy Chief of Operations at Mountain View Fire. I'm a product of a merge with Rocky Mountain Fire about a year and a few months ago at the beginning of 2021. I came across from Rocky Mountain Fire. We have 10 stations. We cover about 250-ish square miles from the top of Flagstaff out to Dacono. From Meade down, we cover the old Rocky Flats area, and that's as far south as we go. We don't cover Lafayette, Louisville, City of Boulder, City of Longmont, Hygiene. Those are all separated out from us, but we cover most everything else.
And I'm Curtis Johnson. I'm a division chief with the Sheriff's Office. I've only worked for the sheriff for a little over a year. Joe Pelly recruited me away from Boulder PD. I spent about 27 and a half years working for the Boulder Police Department. And then when recruited away by Joe, I couldn't resist working for him. And we are your countywide law enforcement agency. By statute, the sheriff is the fire warden for the county. So he's required to summon resources for wildfires on public lands. And we're also the contract law enforcement agency for the town of Superior. So instead of having their own police department as a municipality, they pay us to be their police department. So our involvement was from beginning to end and still ongoing.
Still ongoing.
Yeah, and both of us worked that day and were directly involved in the fire.
Yeah, with evacuations and resources and all that stuff.
Yeah.
You can go to the next slide. So some high-level fire facts about the fire. Just over 1,000 structures were destroyed. Just about half of those were in Mountain View's district alone. We're estimating revenue lost to Mountain View because there's no longer an approved structure on the land. It's going to be somewhere between $450,000 and $500,000. There was an additional 160-ish structures that were damaged, so you have the total structures there. 74 fire departments responded, 155 agencies in total were there. That includes law enforcement and Forest Service and fire departments and all sorts of people. 155 is what we tallied to be there. But
And that's probably close. Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't realize David put that picture in there. That's my house. If you know where Avista Hospital is and Coal Creek Golf Course, there's a neighborhood on the Avista side of Dillon Road, south of Coal Creek Ranch. That's where my home used to be.
St. Andrews?
Right off St. Andrews, Muirfield Court, yeah. So, well, I can tell you more about how that's going later, but we'll talk about the fire first.
So a lot of things lined up that day to have the latest fire on record in the state of Colorado and the earliest fire. Happened since it went overnight. But it was the driest 6 months since we've started recording that. It was the warmest, second warmest 6 month period since we've started recording weather in 1872. Wind speeds were at 105, some were clocked at 115 out of Highway 72 and 93. It blew my hat right off when I stood out there, and that's when I knew we were in trouble because I lost my good hat. So I was upset about that. Temps were only in the mid-40s though. It was actually kind of chilly if you were out and about that. We only burned about 6,200 acres, which relatively speaking for a wildfire isn't that many. But this is the most destructive fire in Colorado history so far.
And the other piece I would add is, if you remember the spring of 21, it was a pretty moist, nice, beautiful, you know, everything was green and beautiful. The downside to that is vegetation grew very well in the spring. And then with the dry 6 months, everything got really baked.
And we didn't see any snowfall. So a lot of times the snowfall will lay the grass over and pack it down, which helps, you know, slow fire travel, but it was all standing fuel. All the grasses were this high, so they were tinder dry, and there was still a lot of surface area on them to burn, so that didn't help us things either, because we hadn't seen any of that packing down of the grass that last year or so.
Evacuation orders, I can talk about that.
Please do.
That's part of what we do. So I'm guessing most of you are aware that prior to the Marshall Fire, there was a fire up on Middle Fork, north of Boulder. And that pulled a lot of our resources up there early on. And we had launched some evacuations, Middle Fork and areas east of US 36, where that fire was burning. The good thing about that fire is it burned into grazed pasture land. So if you're familiar with that area, there are a lot of fields out there that are traditionally eaten by animals, which is a good thing for us fighting fire, because grass links were 1.5 inches, 2 inches. And it ran to a creek, and it pretty much fizzled out when it hit the water through the grazed pasture, and it didn't jump, it didn't move. We were able to get a handle on it pretty early. The 9 evacuation orders with the Marshall Fire, our biggest challenge was getting ahead of the fire. With 100-mile-an-hour winds and dry conditions, we had trouble getting an assessment of exactly where the fire was and where it was going, because it was moving like a freight train. And Sterling was in the middle of it.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I was there very early on, but visibility, if you were in the dust and the smoke, I couldn't see past the hood. At one point, I had to turn my navigation map on in my car to make sure I was at the right intersection where I thought I was. And sometimes I actually wasn't. I thought I wasn't near Costco. I was right next to Costco. I couldn't see Costco out my window. So conditions were very tough. We had softball-sized stuff on fire flying through the air, full 2x4s, sheets of metal, all sorts of stuff, helping spread the fire a lot, right? Like big embers were traveling. At one point, a deputy reported they were doing 45, 50 down Marshall, and the fire passed them. So it's moving. It's really moving, and it's hard to get situational awareness in that situation.
So the evacuation system that was in place worked as designed, but traditionally, the opt-in system that we have, Everbridge, is our alert and warning system that we own. It was really designed with our mountain backdrop in mind, where fires traditionally happen. And It automatically has, we put into it every quarter, all of the landline telephones that exist in the county. And we get the updates quarterly. So if you have a CenturyLink phone or a Xfinity phone, we get those numbers every month and update them. We pull out old numbers. And the reason it was so focused on landlines is because in the mountains, especially 5 to 7 years ago, cell service is not great and everyone has a landline. So it's a way to connect with them. On top of that, there's an opt-in piece of it where anyone in the county can opt in, add a cell phone number, you can get text alerts, you can get email alerts as a backup to your landline being called. The challenge that we discovered is today, just out of curiosity, how many of you have a landline phone in your house? And how many of you just rely on a cell phone? Right. So from what we've seen, about 40% of the homes in Boulder County might still have a landline associated with them. And we're now dealing with fire threats that are not in our mountain backdrop. They're in our urban and suburban areas. So we've added, and it says coming in April, it came last Friday, we were up and running on a system called WEA, Wireless Emergency Alerts. There's good and bad with WEA. Like all FCC things, there can be challenges. Wireless Emergency Alerts now gives us the ability to touch any cell phone, generally speaking, in the geographic area that we want to evacuate. The challenge with that is some older phones don't have good geolocating technology in them, so they're not going to be associated with a polygon we draw on a map. You might be 3 miles away and get the alert. Other phones, they tell us we'll be within 1/10 of a mile, which is better, but we try to be very strategic with evacuations because we don't want to flood the transportation pathways out of danger. And if we over alert, we create a situation where we're going to have traffic problems involving people who don't necessarily need to evacuate. And the other thing we know from having worked with floods in 2013 when we did some alerting, we get looky-loos too. People get alerted and decide, I'm going to go take a look. And that creates traffic going the wrong direction. So we have enabled wireless emergency alert capability. That system, when we launch it, we have to use Everbridge to start. So we'll launch an Everbridge message to anyone who's opted in or has a landline. Secondary to that, we'll launch a wireless emergency alert, which will touch every cell phone, generally speaking. I can tell you we launched some during the in-car fire, and people in Missoula, Montana got an alert, and there's some other bugs I'll tell you about with that. But we will do that for an imminent life safety threat with the knowledge now that over alerting is better than under alerting. And that also captures people who might be visiting our community who wouldn't have a phone associated with this community. If you're on a hike and there's a fire in the mountains and you're from Kansas City, you'll get the alert if you're in that general area. It also touches NOAA weather radio. So if you have a weather radio or get weather alerts, it may push out through that. It touches the National Public Broadcasting System. So if it's bad enough, a television station can choose, they won't do it just because we ask, but they can choose to launch an alert on television and radio. We've been cautioned about that, like on a Sunday, fourth quarter of a Broncos game, they're probably not going to launch an alert. And so it broadens our reach to tell people what's going on, but we also lose some control. The person in Missoula, Montana that got alerted to the in-car fire had a third-party app on their phone, one of the weather apps. So NOAA weather radio was alerted. The weather app picked that up and pushed it out to all their customers, regardless of where they are. So there are challenges with it, but it is another tool that we will use. I would encourage you to opt into that system and maintain your credentials and your numbers and your address in that system, because there are things that could impact your community that we would not launch a wireless emergency alert for, but that we might use Everbridge for. Simple example might be we have a hazmat situation right here in downtown Niwot. There's not an imminent life safety threat, but we want all of you to stay home and stay out of the area. We might draw a 10-block map and push out an Everbridge alert to you, and you might want to know that information. And you'll get a phone call and a text and an email to tell you, don't go downtown until we get things cleaned up. And I know that link will be on the website. So you can check back, click, it's very easy, it's address-based. So if there's a problem with the address you associate, then you'll get the alert. Question?
I've been getting those red flag alerts. Is anybody else this week? What's that coming from?
Some of those are probably coming through county or sheriff's office email. Are you getting them texts or?
Where's, anybody else? Anybody else?
I got one like an hour ago.
Do you know who it came from? Because we are,
It's like just the weather.
is it weather app?
Weather app.
It could very well be a weather app. Do you have a weather app on your phone? Yeah, that's not us.
Okay.
But we are gonna add that, we can add that to Everbridge so that when we have red flag or no burn, we can push that information out. And we're looking to dump that in.
I was wanting to determine whether your cell phone is old enough or new enough.
I would use Google. I can tell you, when we launched them at Sheriff's Office Communications Center for the in-car fire, my phones did not go off. I have a brand new iPhone 13. So it's WIA 3.0 capable, brand new. I was more than 1/10 of a mile away from the evacuation, so I did not get an alert. But other people in the room with like an iPhone 6 or 7, they got alerts because they were WIA 1.0 or 2.0 capable.
What do they say? 70% of the phones out there are still the older version.
Yeah.
Just because people haven't gotten around and bought a $1,500 iPhone 13 or something, right? It doesn't happen very often. So they say 75% of phones out there still are the older version. You'll get it probably more so than you should. Is really the thing.
Yeah.
The thing about this is we do have to push these out to the cell phone companies, and they also have to look at the polygon and say, well, we don't really have a cell tower in that area, so we're going to make it bigger, or we're going to make it smaller. So once it leaves the dispatch center,
We lose control.
into the private carriers, we lose all control of it. So that's one thing to remember.
Question back here.
If you're registered on Everbridge.
Yep.
Will VIA pick that information up, or do you need to re-register on VIA?
No, WIA is automatically done. You don't have to do anything to register for WIA. Sign up for Everbridge and you'll get the best information.
WIA is similar. Have you ever gotten an Amber Alert?
Yeah.
So WIA is similar to that. You don't have to sign up for an Amber Alert. You won't have to sign up for this wireless emergency alert. It knows your phone's in the area. It'll automatically push it to you.
That was gonna be my question. How is it that we all get those Amber Alerts,
Mhm.
but we can't get what's more of an emergency situation
So-
for us?
Now you can with that WIA system.
Yeah.
The challenge is for evacuations, for Amber Alerts, nobody's gonna go running into traffic. For wireless emergency alerts telling you there's a big fire coming, go. We just want to be strategic about when we move people so that not everybody's on Niwot Road at the same time. If only the western part of the city needs to move.
And we saw that in the Marshall fire. So the initial evacuation came from the fire command that said, I need everything 3 miles east of me evacuated.
Okay.
We have never said that before, I'll tell you that. In my 30 years of being a firefighter, I've never gotten on the radio and said I need 3 miles east of me evacuated, right? So they evacuated it. They did what they're supposed to, but people sat 45 minutes in their neighborhood trying to get out of the road, right? And I would be panicked. I was just told that I have to leave and now I'm sitting in traffic. So we're trying to be more strategic about this and pick up smaller areas and get these out so people can get out that are closest to the fire, and then we work out from that so we don't get things plugged up. And we'll talk more about that during a little bit here about evacuations and what you should do and have and where you should go. So.
The most effective evacuations we do though are still door to door. Sheriff's office has been doing door to door evacuations all over the county for decades, and nothing beats the good old pounding on the door, get out. And we did tons of in-person evacuations. Well, let me put it this way. There were 2 people who lost their lives in this fire. Both were warned in person to leave by a deputy or other law enforcement or public safety people and told to get out. So evacuations, we would have liked to have done better and been further ahead of this and given people more time to grab things and get out. But the fire was moving so fast, we didn't have the opportunity to do that. We are amazed. We were thinking at the time that we would easily have 100+ fatalities because of the speed and ferocity of fire and the way neighborhoods burned. And only having 2 people lose their lives to us is a huge victory.
When the fire hit Superior on that western side of Costco, We literally had fire trucks cutting the hoses off their trucks because they're being over with a fire and leaving. And at that point, I stopped and thought, this is not a good day for us. Luckily, we lost a bunch of equipment. Mountain View had $100,000+ worth of damage to vehicles from doors and windows and stuff being burnt up and things like that. But only 2 people that were contacted, which is great. And honestly, we owe that to law enforcement because it was the knocking on the doors, going door to door, the running through the Costco, things like that, that really got people moving and out of their thing. And we'll talk about neighbors helping neighbors and some things like that too.
Yep. So quick map of where we were evacuating and how things developed, but the fire really started in this general vicinity. I can't be too specific or my boss will get mad for, it's still under investigation. But as it moved east, we were launching various evacuations, warnings. This is north side of South Boulder Road. Neighborhoods up there were warned. Most of them chose to evacuate. A lot of them had to use open space trails and other ways because the roads were jammed up. But not a whole lot of roads to take east to get out of the path. Dillon Road was a mess. South Boulder Road was a mess. All through the heart of Louisville. Rock Creek Parkway through Superior was a log jam. And some of that we'll talk about too when we talk about evacuating. Losing your sense of obedience to traffic signs. If it means get out, we're okay with that. Driving on the wrong side of the road, we may be okay with that. We want to get people safe.
Cautiously going through a stop sign or a red light, things like that, yeah. So that was kind of the Marshall Fire, what we experienced at a high level. Any questions about that?
I got a couple questions.
Sure.
Of the information I've been reading, and going back, feel free to not answer it though, about the origin. I was looking at this article was on January 11th from CBS, and it said that service meteorologists working overnights put an update out at 3:36 a.m. standing in the areas of Boulder below 6,000 feet. So the high wind advisory was out at 3:30 in the morning. There was no red flag because of the conditions that didn't meet the red flag, but it does say that the Boulder County Sheriff still puts out an automatic open burning ban when high wind warnings are watched. No one should have been burning openly. So they've ruled out so far what we've heard, lightning wasn't it, wasn't human caused, someone throwing a cigarette butt or having a campfire, it wasn't an electric line, so it boils down to the whole thing or that the 12 tribes shed fire. I don't know how the investigation is going to end up, but what I read was that the fire department did respond to the shed fire, but they didn't put it out. Is that true?
No. We didn't respond to a shed fire. Are you talking about that call that was for a couple days earlier?
No, it was at 11:15 in the morning of the Marshall Fire. I had read that the Mountain View Fire Department and the engine responded to a report of a fire, and they had a video on the 12 tribes property, a shed going up in flames.
Sure.
And then it went on to say that the fire department did not extinguish that fire, and they drove off because they thought that the homeowners or whoever lives there has that responsibility.
Oh, I'll tell you that's not true about the non-extinguishment part. I don't know, I don't know the series of events that happened there. We did get called out for a line down in a possible fire. We did respond, and I can tell you the first crews on scene reported already structures on fire, and they went to work. So they were out extinguishing fire in that area. As to which part was first for them, I don't know.
So they didn't show up at the shed fire and just drive away?
No.
That's a pretty damning report. You think you would have pushed back on it because it really paints you guys in a bad light.
Sure, no, I understand.
There was a lot of bad reporting.
There was a lot of bad reporting in that area. And part of that is you just kind of take them as they come. But and for the investigation part, the fire department had delegated that response to sheriff's department, which then in turn delegated to Forest Service, I believe. So the Forest Service has come in and is investigating that fire. I don't know where that stands, honestly, or anything about it. My agency's not involved in the investigation.
Yeah, and there's still forensic work being done. We want to be really careful about how that's investigated and where it points. I know there's been news information out there that there could be more than one source of that fire. There is an active coal seam in the area. Started a fire in 2005. that's being looked at. There are other potential causes that are being considered, and once we have some lab data back, we'll be working with the Forest Service to really hone in on what the cause and origin of the fire were.
Yeah, you want to determine if it was preventable or not.
Absolutely.
Seconds count in those horrible winds.
All right, so that was Marshall Fire. So we have some information for you. So at the beginning, we said if, should, when this is gonna happen out here. So as we explained, that Middle Fork Fire is a perfect example that could have easily traveled to this neighborhood, right? This community. So we wanna talk about a few things that you can do to be prepared. Because I can tell you that a lot of people were not prepared. I talked to a lot of people in Rock Creek that thought like, evacuate, what do you mean evacuate? I don't know, for a wildfire, I don't do that, right? And this fire is kind of, this fire has kind of changed the way we think about wildland urban interface fires, right? It's not so much now that it's on the backdrop. It's, if I have 5 acres of open space next to my house, I am now an interface, could be an interface fire victim, right? So we wanted to spread the word about some house prep things that you can do. But I'm sure you can talk about the video of your house.
Yeah, I can tell you what will help you with insurance.
Right.
Maybe we can get to that in a minute.
Yeah, yeah.
We'll go through some other things to prep, and then I'm happy to, currently working through my insurance policy, I can tell you some things that I wish I knew 6 months ago that I've learned in the last 60 days.
So we recommend videoing on your phone and then keeping it safe somewhere, either in the cloud or on a computer, or duplicate it and give it to your relatives or a friend's house that's not yours. We recommend videoing your house inside and out at least once a year. And be specific with it, right? Open the closets.
Open every drawer.
Just because the insurance people are gonna ask you, well, how do I know you had that? Well, here's my video, it was hanging on my wall. Or here it is, my closet, that was, you know, there's my 400 shoes in my house. I have I don't have 400, I have lots of shoes. But, so video that and try to keep that updated once a year. I know it sounds like weird, but it doesn't take long to do, honestly, if you're taking a video, and go through the house that way. Important documents or copies of them, like we were talking about, can you keep in a safe deposit box, give them to family and friends or someone that you trust that's not in your house? Because if you're told to leave right now, you really don't have time to run around the house trying to find like, where'd my college diploma go? Because it's really important to me, like because it's jammed in somewhere. So, landscaping. We saw the fire, a lot of the fire brands, embers, whatever you want to call them, would get caught up in the landscaping next to a home. And a lot of these houses have evergreens or, sorry, am I evergreens or, junipers or what do you want to call those things? And those essentially kind of like little buckets of gas, to be honest with you. They're very oily plants. And so if they get started, they can really put up a lot of heat. So think about that when you're landscaping your house, like keep those types of plants away, right? My house, I have 3 to 4 foot of gravel around it. It's not the most beautiful thing, but it helps me feel better. Think about fire landscaping. You can Google fire resistant landscaping, things like that. We urge you to do that. We saw a lot of mulch carrying the fire through this thing because of the winds and the embers would get in the mulch. My dog has kicked the mulch all over my yard, so it doesn't matter at this point. But so mulch can carry that as well. Yard or field maintenance. As we talked about, the grazed field or the mowed field, fire doesn't travel as well through it. In my neighborhood, we have open space, and there's a big debate whether you mow open space or not, right? We love it because the rabbits and the mice and everything live in there, which bring the hawks and all these things that we like to watch, and the coyotes. But fire will travel through my 4-foot high grass open space quickly, and it butts up to homes. So maybe you can find a happy medium that you mow 2 or 3 widths off the fence lines, off the path lines, and try to isolate that. I'm going to tell you with 105 winds, this fire crossed US 36, and I'm not talking by a fire brand. The actual flames were all the way across US 36 and transferred across the thing. So that's an 8-lane highway up there on top of the hill. So if we have 105 coming through here, 2 mower widths, not going to stop it. But on your typical, what I'll call, typical grass fire, that can make a difference for you.
On open space, does the county have an obligation to mow that? I mean, we're surrounded by county open space here.
I think that's a point for discussion as we learn from this fire, is how we manage our open space lands, because we have historically looked at them as preserved space, very natural. Do we need to change our thinking? Do we need to figure out a plan to maybe manage that land better so we don't see, and there's a mix of city and county open space where this fire, where Marshall Fire happened. The western part's city open space. There's some Superior's county. How you manage those lands, or how we as a community tell the county to manage those lands, is gonna be a topic of discussion.
But if you have HOA lands, right, that's an easier discussion to have, and that's what my open space is, it's HOA owned. So we're having those discussions at the board meetings about how do we maintain this preserve for the animals, but also try to make it fire safe as well.
Do you sense the county will start talking about that, or?
I don't know yet.
Okay.
They're a little persnickety about open space. It can be a challenge.
We do have our own buy it, but they don't maintain it.
Yeah, that's what I said.
Yes, sir.
I had an idea. When I was a kid, the buildings had on each of the floors a fire cabinet. You had a fire extinguisher, and then you had a hose on a reel that would extend all the way down the hallway, and you put out fires. That's before they had the sprinklers and different systems. And I was looking around the neighborhood, and I go, hey, the fire hydrants are spaced about 300 to 500 feet apart.
Mhm.
What if each of our communities, we went ahead and put in a ground vault, put in 700 feet of hose, because they connected, you can get 50, 7,500 planks with a nozzle and then a wrench, and then we could respond because we'd be the ones that would see it first. We could hook it up to the fire hydrant. I have a property in Branson, Missouri, and I learned how to use my fire hydrant there to avoid that hammer shot, whatever they call it. You can do each of the fire hydrants for less than $1,000 each. It seems in this $500 million problem, that's pretty cheap insurance. It's a backup system that if we had to, we could put out our own, or at least get some water on a house fire.
Sure, not a bad idea. I'll tell you with the Marshall Fire, I didn't want to be there in the middle of it, to be honest with you. I would never ask someone to stand up and try to do that. I think we would have gotten a lot of people hurt that day if they would have tried to fight that fire, right? And that's my concern with doing that is trying to maintain training and all these things, and people that are moving in and out, and then asking people to get in kind of harm's way there is
I'm
not
just
what we
thinking like
typically do.
one house. I'm not thinking
Sure.
50 houses.
Yeah, no, that's right. Not a bad
Something to
idea.
think about.
Yeah, it is.
It's cheap insurance. and,
Sure.
Hopefully you never need it, but if you do, you can be there within a minute and get the water on a fire, and it can save some time too. 'Cause it can start putting down the heat.
What's the response time to like the average house? The longest and the shortest?
The longest can be in the mountain areas up on Flagstaff because it's fairly remote, but we have a first engine on scene to the most reported 15 minutes up there, and then the shortest could be right around the corner, so it'll be 30 seconds.
Within 9 miles.
In Iowa, we're just down the street, so everybody's within 10 minutes at the loud side.
Question. Excuse me, kudos to open space people. I had some discussion with them several months ago, and if you were to walk the path from the left-hand Grange Ballpark coming west, and you cross the bridge, and there's a pond off to the left, and if you continue on, there is a bunch of dry leaves, broken limbs, and it's a fire hazard, and there are homes just adjacent to that. I called them up, and their initial response was, oh, get your homeowners, volunteers, and yeah, all the seniors that live in that area with no equipment to do it properly. But 2 weeks later, they came back and says, we're gonna take care of that for you. So starting tomorrow or Thursday, they're gonna clean out that area for us at no cost to the homeowners.
Cool. Well, maybe some minds are changing.
Yes.
Something else we saw in the Marshall Fire was gutters. Keep your gutters clean. Embers laying in the gutter. There's leaves in there, pine needles, and that starts there. Then it works its way into the soffit, and then it works its way into the roof. At one point, we counted from time of ignition to involved in catching the house fire on fire in Marshall, it was 8 minutes. So by the time we were trying to get out ahead of it, and someone timed from the time it started, it was 8 minutes before the next house was on fire. So that's moving fairly quickly. But it travels between things like gutter. We know it's patio furniture, and I'm a culprit of this. I have my cushions out there because I like to go out there this time of year, right, on the nice days. Embers land on all that, catch it on fire, and now your deck's on fire, and now your house is on fire. Fences, we saw a lot of fire travel up the fences to the house. So different type of fence material if you're allowed to. I know that a lot of towns are having this discussion now, HOAs are having this discussion, that it's not just a wood fence that butts up right to your house, but can we make it something different? So that's another
My
concept.
HOA just talked about this, and one thing was like post and rail or the lattice fences. I saw a video where a bunch of their lattice fences are going up. And I thought post and rail would just be at least separated. Is
Post
there?
and rail is a pretty good idea, or a different material if you can.
Okay.
The plastics tend to melt and not necessarily carry the fire through them.
Okay.
Or a metal fence is the best thing if people can do it. Expensive,
Yeah.
but fire safe, right? Of course.
Okay.
No, you're correct. Oh, I'm sorry.
So what are you supposed to do with your patio furniture, your cushions on your deck
So
chairs?
what I'll tell you is, if you're gonna be gone on vacation for a while, bring them in.
Yeah,
It's a high wind day.
High wind day, I gotta do that because they blow in my neighbor's yard, but if you have a red flag day, you're probably not gonna be sitting outside because it's gonna be windy and it's gonna be super hot, right? Bring them in on those days. On your average day, your average evening, it's fine to leave them out there, but if you have a high wind day or a red flag day, we recommend bringing that stuff in.
Garage doors are important. We lost power in huge chunks of the community during the fire. People are trying to evacuate, cars in the garage, all your stuff's in the car, now your garage door opener won't work. Everyone should have a red release handle to pull that and manually lift the door. Make sure you know that, have that, and can use it. Or plan ahead on a really bad day, or if you get the early call and you still have power, get your car out first, load it in the driveway so you can escape.
I picked 2 people up along the side of the road, 105-mile-an-hour winds, fire was about a minute out from us, and they couldn't get their car out of the garage. So they decided it would be better to leave on foot. We're glad we found them. Yeah, so have a plan, right? On these high fire danger days, I've now started having a plan. I have a go bag that I've got some like buffet stretchy gray sweats in it, right? And some things like that because that way I know that, then I know they'll fit. When I go inside, everybody, if I don't get them out for a year, I'll still fit in them, especially around Christmas time. So I put some of that stuff in a bag. So I have 3 days of clothes that if I'm not home, my wife can grab for me, or I can grab for her if she's not home, or we have it to go.
And this is an area, when I raised my hand earlier, we failed. Living in suburban Louisville, I never thought this would happen to me, right? And we have friends that live west of Lyons, up in Sugarloaf. They all have plastic containers stacked in the garage, ready to go to fill up with their valuables. They have a list of what they want to take, what's important to them, what they know they can't replace. And they have a plan. And they know if we get told to leave, here's a list of everything we need to get. Here's our routes to get out of our community, depending on where fire may be, and they're ready to do it. We honestly thought, and I had left home, obviously, to go to work. My wife was at home, our 2 adult children were over, and their mindset at the time was, we'll be out for a day or 2 because of smoke damage, our house will never burn down. They grabbed me a bunch of coats because it was going to snow the next day. My son, who's 23, and he's a 23-year-old boy, grabbed sweats, gym shorts, socks, no underwear. My wife grabbed passports and computers. Computers are great, but I'll tell you, lesson learned, passports, easiest document to replace after a disaster. When we went to the Disaster Assistance Center that was set up in Lafayette, big, huge table. Hey, if you lost your passport, fill out this one form, sign your name, we'll get you a new one, 10 days. So were passports really worth it? No. Things that you don't think about. I miss my kids' art. Kindergarten. Can't replace it. All the other things in my house, TV, I can buy another one. But the mementos are the things you can't replace. Computers were great. I would urge you, if you have old photographs or you have negatives, to digitize them and put them in the cloud. We were lucky we had done that several years ago. So most of our photos were in the cloud. Things in a safe deposit box. We had a safe deposit box. Only problem was the keys were still in our house. But the bank was very cool. They drilled the lock, no charge. We got car titles, birth certificates, all those things that were at the bank. So have a safe place to put it. If you have a relative that lives 5+ miles away from where you are, that you're comfortable storing those things with or copies with, that's a great idea. But the safe deposit box saved us. Dealing with a car loss, having the title handy was a good deal. because I didn't want to have to replace a title before I could get salvage value for my car. I'll tell you a story. So obviously I own some guns. I don't have a crazy collection of guns, but I have a few guns. And I had one of the small kind of briefcase size fire safes that had a gun my dad had given me when I graduated from high school. And it was the first gun I ever carried as a police officer, and I wanted to keep it. And that fire safe, come to find out, is rated for about 800 degrees for maybe 30 minutes. It's built for a residential house fire, not the firestorm that we saw. My insurance adjuster for our dwelling coverage has worked fires from Washington through Southern California. He has only seen one fire safe survive that kind of fire. And it was a stamp collector who had one stamp worth $1 million that he had this exorbitantly fancy fire safe and it lived and everything inside was fine. But we have seen a lot of our community members have been turning in the remnants of their firearms for destruction. They were all in reasonably good fire safes like you might buy at Cabela's. None of them withstood the heat of that fire. The I-beam that supported my house twisted in the fire. They're saying between 1,800 and 2,500 degrees for more than an hour on my property, nothing is going to survive.
So check, if you have a fire safe, it'll have a label on it that tells you how long and how hot. I have a pretty exorbitant or crazy safe, and it's like 1,800 degrees for 2 hours.
Yeah.
But we saw 1,800 degrees for 4 to 6 hours because it falls in the basement, everything falls on top of it, and now it's like sticking it right in that hot bed of coals in your barbecue, and it sat there and cooked. So just be aware of that, especially check your safe placement, right? So if you can leave it in a garage so it doesn't fall in the basement, great. Some of those things now you start to consider about that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
you can go to the next one.
Yeah.
One thing I want to talk about, evacuations, have a meeting place. I know when we were little, we learned to have a meeting place at the mailbox outside if there's a fire. Have a meeting place outside your neighborhood, outside your town. Don't count that you're going to be able to make a cell phone call. We burn up cell phone towers. We turn power off to a majority of them. Nobody thought this. We have a backup generator, natural gas. I asked for the gas to be shut off in 2 towns. I've never done that before. I asked for the gas to be shut off in the entire town of Superior and Louisville because all the gas meters were falling over and flames were shooting out. So now I don't have a backup generator. So now I don't have power. And now the cell phone towers don't work. And they're not going to work for probably 12 hours till they can get standalone things up. Text messaging is a better way to get through. Less data, different band, all these kinds of things, so you can text message. But if you say, hey, I will meet you, in Erie at the ballpark, if something like this happens, then at least you can meet there and make a plan from there, right? And you're not trying to figure it out on the fly.
You may not be back for hours, days, weeks, or years. Take with you what you need for a day or two. I left work Thursday night knowing my house was gone, went to my daughter's house in Longmont. We didn't sleep, obviously, but at 8 a.m. we were at Target buying toothbrushes, toothpaste. We were at Kohl's right next door in Longmont buying underwear. And then we were looking for an apartment to try to get a roof over our head. If you could survive for 2 or 3 days, I could have worn what I had on for another day or two and been fine. You don't need to overpack. Some things are important, but I've learned really quickly that you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, and you can get by with a whole lot less stuff than you accumulate in a house. We were in there 23 years, and having 4 or 5 polo shirts down, probably enough. Instead of the 30 I had before.
There's a list later on that'll, just to jog your memory,
Yeah.
things to think about, medications, stuff like that, there's a list later.
As we talk about, don't sit in your car waiting to leave. One of the challenges we had trying to get people out of Superior was their supreme obedience to traffic laws. Rock Creek Parkway is 2 lanes in each direction. Everyone's trying to go to the south and east to get out Fulton Road and go east, and everyone stayed in those 2 lanes. And it took a sheriff's deputy directing someone he knew and trusted to lead people into oncoming traffic to get out of so that we could get 4 lanes headed out and use 4 lanes eastbound on Colton. You gotta be careful because there were fire trucks coming in, there were other hazards, but for the most part, well, let me put your biggest fears at rest. We're not gonna write you a ticket for driving the wrong way on the side of the road during a fire like this. We don't have time. Also understand that directing traffic in the conditions we had at the Marshall Fire was nearly impossible because there were literally flaming tumbleweeds coming through the air, and the majority of our employees were still going door to door knocking on people's doors. That came first. We hoped people would figure out, drive that way and drive away. As more resources come, we can get people directing traffic, but it's gonna be chaos for that first hour. And, you know, again, a little conflict with our mountain folk who are used to this. When they get told to evacuate and they can't get out on a main road, most of them are perfectly willing to cut fences and drive through. They're perfectly willing to ram a gate and drive away. That's a little different culture than we have down here in suburbia. But I do have neighbors that were driving on open space trails because their neighborhood streets were jammed. So they, you know, drove up a trail and down. But everyone that they encountered that was doing that, once they got to the main road, they were doing the obedient thing and letting every other car go, and everyone was playing nice. We have a nice community that respects the fact that we're all trying to do the same thing. So it wasn't horrible, but people have to kind of break through the culture of, we got to follow the law during this evacuation. We want you to be safe and alive, and if that means a little risk on your part, then go for it.
Did the Table Mesa people who were evacuated, have they got all their bags packed? I mean, we had seen this, had the same message, and I never did anything, and then all of a sudden Table Mesa is evacuating, you know?
I think that a lot of people are still in the mindset of, well, what are the odds this would happen again? Not me. A lot of those people. Yeah,
5 wildfires.
we had 5 fires today. In our county, or immediately adjacent, the Larimer one kicked up a little, but we had a good fire in Gunbarrel today, 10 acres. We know the cause and origin of that one. That will be a criminal event.
From what you've learned, what about using the mass amount of media support that we have, whether you like it or don't like it? I saw a program on Channel 9 News years ago, I still remember it. It was 2 families, a firefighter's family and a regular family. And they gave them 30 minutes to get out of the house. And then they showed a little video of them doing and it was like crazy. The family that had no planning, no organization, and they were screaming at each other, and, you know, and the firefighters family, they had their stuff, they had their boxes, they had a list on the refrigerator, they grabbed stuff, you know, this kid got the dog and the dog food, and they were out in 10 minutes. It was a huge impact on me. So why not use some of our media resources in our community?
I think there's a story there that can be told.
Yeah.
Yeah, and our community outreach is working on some of those stories to try to produce that to get out to the media.
Yeah.
The other important piece, well, I'll talk insurance for you in a minute, but neighbors helping neighbors. One of the most valuable things that happened during that fire is people checked on their neighbors. And they knew, hey, that woman 2 doors down is elderly, might need help, or that woman on, 2 doors the other way is a nurse and she works nights. I wonder if she's asleep. And they knew each other and they communicated with each other. And so I would encourage you to make sure you're building, and Niwot's a pretty connected community with your neighbors, from what I've been led to believe, but get to know the people in your community and in your neighborhood who might need special help, who might be able to give that special help, who has the big pickup truck that people can jump into and get out, who needs extra time, who has maybe out of town and left pets at home. That was a sad call for me. My neighbor was in New York, 2 cats in the house, called me and said, is there any way someone can try to get the cats? I had to tell him that his house looked like mine and the cats were not coming home.
My street was in the evacuation zone, but we have a text group on our street. And so I encourage you, if you can do that, they all communicate via text. Is everybody aware of what's going on? Do you have all your stuff? Do you need help getting it in the car? Are you outside in the garage? So we have those things. So a big difference about neighbors helping neighbors here too, was first it was door-to-door evacuations that law enforcement did, and then neighbors checking on each other too. Hey, did you hear? We gotta go. Did you do it? So that's important. I know not all of us love our neighbors, but at least you should know them and know something about them so you can help them when they need help, right?
Yeah.
There was, on the last slide, there was one bullet about if you're not home and how to prepare. What do your, other than keep your fingers crossed?
So I would encourage you not to go back home. That was a challenge during this fire because we did have people who were saying, I need to go get my dog. And their neighborhood was actively on fire. At some point, we have to tell you, you cannot go in there. I don't know how I would have prepared. I mean, there's not much you can do if you're not home. And we had lots of friends, you know, the time of year that this fire hit was a blessing and a little bit of a curse. A blessing in that schools were out, so we didn't have to deal with Superior Elementary School, we didn't have to deal with Monarch K, Monarch High School. Those buildings were empty, thank goodness. There are also a lot of people not working because kids are home, it's the holidays. The downside is a lot of our friends and neighbors were in Mexico for the week between Christmas and New Year's and came home to nothing.
If I go on vacation, I'll take a few things, put them in a bin, set it by the front door. My neighbor has a key. I've asked him that if there's time, please grab that. And it's got my laptops in it, or whatever I have. All my pictures are in the cloud. I have a bunch of that stuff, but I put a few things in there that, you know, a few of my son's pieces of art or something. I'll put those in there. If you have time, please grab that one bin. I'm not trying to overburden them with anything, and so they can grab it if our neighborhood has to evacuate. That's how I prepare. But if I'm gone at the store at work, I don't do anything special. Like I'm rolling the dice there.
Yep. Insurance. I have learned a lot about insurance in the last 100 days. Now, I will tell you, I had good insurance. And everyone says, well, who was your company? And I don't mind sharing. My insurance was through Safeco. They're part of Liberty Mutual. And the experience in our neighborhood with Safeco customers, the feedback has been they've been very responsive. The key pieces I would ask you to look at on your policy is, first, is your dwelling insured to the true value of that dwelling with a replacement rider that will allow you to replace a like home? So we had a 50% replacement rider, which meant the value of our house plus 50% is what we would have to rebuild the house. Some other riders or pieces of our policy kicked in though, because this was a federally declared disaster and it was an ISO catastrophe, which is some insurance rating catastrophic event. Both of those ended up basically doubling my policy. So the value of my house as it was on December 30th times double is what I have to rebuild a house with. The other piece I would tell you, if you have a home that is more than 10 years old, check your coverage for code compliance and code upgrades. I live in Louisville. If you've been following the news, there's been a lot in Louisville about 2021 codes versus 2018 codes. My house was built in 1990, so there's a lot of room for improvement. I have enough code coverage to go to 2021 codes, but make sure you look at that code coverage piece if your home is older, because that can be expensive and add to the cost of rebuilding your home. The other piece I would tell you to look at is what coverage you have if you are displaced from your home for an extended period of time. So I'm living in an apartment right now. My insurance company's paying my rent, and they'll pay it with no cap for 24 months. So I have 2 years that they will pay for me to live someplace else. Still got to pay my mortgage on the piece of land that I own, but they're paying my rent, and they're going to allow me to move into a nicer place, hopefully in the next couple of months. A little more room and no shared walls. I'm too old for that. Look at that closely, then look at your contents. If you take your house right now, flip it over and shake it, everything that falls out, it's not bolted down, is your contents coverage. All your clothing, all of your dishes, your kitchen appliances that aren't, that are countertop, not mounted in, all the stuff that you own has a value. And sometimes, cops have a really difficult sense of humor sometimes. Had a piano in my living room that, we got from the CU Music School when my daughter was 5. She played the piano all through high school. Now we were thinking, how in the world are we going to get rid of the piano? Because nobody will take a piano. It's gone. But it has insurance value. It's covered on my insurance policy. It wasn't a Steinway, it's just a piano. But bright spot, I don't have to move my piano. But be prepared for the fact that some insurance companies will require you to inventory and itemize all of your personal belongings to get to that policy limit. So if your policy limit is $300,000, Several of us in our neighborhood and our friends that we've met through the fire literally had 1,800 line spreadsheets with everything we owned itemized and given a value. And it varies from company to company. Some companies, we heard, if you had good video or good photographs of all of your property, they would accept the video and photographs instead of a spreadsheet. Other companies would do interviews and a 3-page survey and determine kind of your lifestyle, like, was the stuff you bought from Crate and Barrel, or was the stuff you bought from a secondhand store? And assess a value that way and pay people out. It's been different with every insurance company. Some have been really difficult. Ours was in the middle. We did a very detailed start of a spreadsheet and got about a third of it and said, here's where we're at. And they said, you can be more general. You can average things, like I had 5 or 6 suits. And they said, just give us an average. 5 suits at $500 a piece, $2,500. And towards the end, our adjuster was about to retire in June, so I think she was ready to be done with us. But we documented it enough that they paid us. And we have that money in the bank now, so we can start replacing things.
I'm speculating on this question, but does the cause of the fire dictate what position the insurance companies will take?
I don't know yet, and I don't think so, because they know none of us caused the fire. Whatever happened, happened, and our house burned down. They're obligated to insure me for the property that I've been paying them for 23 years to insure, and all my contents and my car that was in the garage. And where I think that will kick in is if they're able to determine somebody with deep pockets that might be responsible for the fire, then my insurance company can sue them and try to get their money back. But it has not impacted we ended up with 3 different claims, basically. An auto claim, which has to be handled by the auto guy, a contents claim, and then the dwelling and rebuilding. The other lesson I learned that I will tell you is, if you want to rebuild and you have a good mortgage interest rate, don't pay off your mortgage right away. Some people in the neighborhood said, well, I'm just going to pay off my mortgage so I don't have to pay it anymore. To rebuild a house, they're going to have to get a new mortgage, and interest rates are going up. So our money is held in escrow with our mortgage company to rebuild our house, but it preserves my loan at 3%, and a year from now when I would need a new mortgage, it might be 5%. So there are little tricks and pieces that you learn. And our neighborhood has been very organized. They brought in builders who are interested in building in our neighborhood, floated plans to the neighborhood. We have at least 4 builders that have expressed interest in rebuilding the 139 homes in our little area. And so
you've been in your house a while.
Uh-huh.
So when you get your new house, you just start there and you've just got your 10 years left to pay it off? Or?
Well, whatever mortgage I have right now,
yeah.
My goal is to rebuild a house similar to what I had,
yeah.
and not increase my mortgage.
Okay, and it'll end the same time it would have if
Yep.
you never bought. Oh,
Yep. Yeah, I'm still paying, every month I'm still writing them a check for a vacant plot.
There's a lot of hazard from burnt plastics and burned everything. How is that taken care of with the fire too?
So the debris removal has started. That debris removal will go at least 6 inches deep in the soil to scrape off anything that's on the ground. And they're being very particular about how they remove things. If you go out and watch them, they're trying to reclaim as much of the metal and recyclable material as possible, taking it one place. Everything else is treated basically like hazmat. They're wrapping it in plastic in trucks and taking it to a landfill where they can dispose of it.
And then they cover the lot with erosion control with like a mat to keep all the dust and everything down.
I'd like to organize teams of volunteers to go in and help clean up. Is that allowed? Is that safe? Is
Not
that,
now.
do
So
you know when?
shortly after the fire, there were a bunch of people who volunteered to sift through properties. So for example, there was this really nice group of Southern Baptists from Dallas that came to our house and put on full Tyvek suits, respirators, and dug through, well, everything was in the basement, dug through, and they found a few things of ours, some things that were meaningful. But then the city and county decided to put a hydromulch on top of everything to keep everything from blowing away or as it snowed, running into the gutters. So the properties now are basically no trespass zones, except for the permitted debris removal companies. And what we're seeing, our neighbor's lot was done recently, is a nice, reasonably flat piece of dirt to start over with.
We're going for about an hour here, so we'll wrap this up, but here's a couple forms. This will be on the website. I'll also put them up on the Mountain View Fire website. They're just, it's a list of emergency things to gather in an evacuation, and it's just there to kind of spur your memory to add some things, or you can take it and change it to what you want to put on your fridge or whatever. And then the red flag actions are just some reminders about bringing in your cushions, have a bag packed, you know, and don't be out like mowing over the rocks, causing sparks or smoking or having campfires, right? It's just some basic stuff to try to remember. It sounds common sense. We had 5 fires today. It's not common sense, right? Like common sense is not common. So we'll put those up on both spots as well.
And I would urge you not to underestimate the fact that just because you live in this nice little community of Niwot and you're several miles away from the mountains, that you are not vulnerable. You are very vulnerable. The Middle Fork fire, there were some projections done after that fire. Had it not hit grazed pasture, had it not stopped, had it kept going, would have taken out the north parts of Niwot all the way up to southern Longmont. And could have been just as devastating as the Marshall fire. We all live now in a wildfire danger area. And the more you can do to prepare yourself, you know, we had people asking us, why didn't you turn on your sprinklers? It's December 30th, my sprinklers have been off for 3 months, right? Why didn't they turn on the sprinklers on the golf course next to my house? Same thing, they don't want the lines to freeze, they're all shut down. We had water issues during that fire. So many firefighters were tapping into hydrants, trying to put water on fire. And homes like mine, once they burned down, the main water line into the house severed, and it's just pouring water into my foundation. And so that's 139 houses in my neighborhood that are just draining the water system to the point that
It's 1,000 structures, right, that are just free flowing water. Then we have a third of the hydrants at least open, trying to do that. And then to boot, Superior's, we turned the power off on them. And then we burned up the generator because the fire got to the water treatment plant. So they couldn't help. And then, you know, Louisville was within 2 hours, I think, of exhausting their water storage. They ended up putting raw water into the systems. That's why it took so long to get potable water back. They had to put raw water in just to maintain the firefight. So we were without water for several hours until they could get that switched over and figure out how to do it. You know, you talk to a public work person, like, put raw water in my water system. No way will I ever do that. So it took some convincing for them to come around and get that kind of fired up. But all sorts of weird stuff that we encounter. I hope we never encounter again, but it's very possible. Hopefully not in my career, but it's very possible we will experience that in this area again. We get the high winds. We're a high wind area right here in Boulder County, right? For whatever reason, but we take that beating all the time.
And we've spent a lot of the last 3 months learning, figuring out how we better prepare for this, both fire, sheriff's office, law enforcement.
Dispatch centers, everybody.
Making sure that we have systems that we knew worked in the mountains in place for the flats. Making sure that we are doing everything we can to robustly communicate messages, warn people. We now know what it's like to fight a 100-mile-an-hour wind fire. And should we have another, we'll know. If the fire's over by IBM, we'll be evacuating Niwot immediately because we know how fast it can move.
Great. Thank you for having me here. Really appreciate it.
Exactly on the website.
It's not up there yet on Mountain View Fire, but I'll put a link to it on the front page of our Mountain View Fire. And then it's going to go up tomorrow in the association's website as well, at niwot.org. There are some business cards on this table of mine. If you have any other questions, please feel free to contact me. I'm happy to come out and talk to you individually or as a group again. So, yes.
Is there any way to check to see if your fire extinguishers are still good? They're like 6 years old. How do you know?
There's usually a hydrostatic date on them, and if it's not, if it's a multi-purpose fire extinguisher for like your kitchen, there should be a little gauge on it, and if it's in the green, it's pressurized, and then you got to shake that thing because it's filled with powder, and it'll pack down over the years if you just let it sit. So shake that thing up so you can feel it slosh back and forth, if it's in the green and you can slosh back and forth, it'll be all right.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, gentlemen, for your time. The slide deck from tonight and all the information and all the links will be on niwot.org tomorrow morning. So hopefully you didn't take too many detailed notes. And I apologize for kind of cutting off discussion to other things like the Boulder Library District, because I knew that this was going to be a lengthy topic and a very important one. If you could go to the next 2 slides, skip this one. If you want to talk about library, if you want to talk about subdivision roads, if you want to talk about crime, contact us. You can. We've got very specific emails for topics, but if you have no idea what topic to file that under, just send an email to info@niwot.org, and someone will respond to you that day, unless of course it's a weekend or anything or something like that. But anyways, next slide. Yeah. Thank you for coming. Again, I apologize for cutting some of the discussion short, but we had a long discussion with these fine gentlemen here, and I appreciate your time, and I hope you gained something out of it, and I want to thank you for supporting the community through the Niwot Community Association, and thank you for coming.